Gospel according to Luke, the 15th chapter. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me." And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? But I perish here with hunger. I will arise, and I will go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he rose, and he came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate, for this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' He began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. And as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him back safe and sound.' But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, 'Look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' And he said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found.'" The word of the Lord. You may be seated. The world is strewn with companies and polities that have a set of solutions they want to implement while ignoring the issues that they actually face. Needless to say, institutions that do this don't last very long. Usually the people who belong to these groups lament the changes and challenges they are facing. Yet it was precisely these issues that they were called to address, and they failed to do so. It doesn't take much to see how tempting this is. Our Bible lesson today is just such an incident. We no doubt see this story as the way that God's grace is open to everyone who returns to Him. And that should not be forgotten. To be sure, that is an issue. But let me just say, that is far from the main issue of this story. The main issue is so uncomfortable that most churches want to ignore it and file it away. Now, what is the main issue? Well, we're tipped off by whom Jesus is addressing. The first thing we should notice is just who makes up Jesus' audience at the beginning of chapter 15. The exact passage runs something like this. Near to him, that is Christ, were drawing all of the revenue agents, all the IRS agents of the Roman Empire, and all of the screw-ups to hear him. All the bad people, all the people you don't want to be associated with. I remember watching an episode of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and it was the first guy who won $1 million. And when he told people what he did, there were these boos and hisses from the audience. He was an IRS agent. And so it's amazing. These are not good people. And yet they're drawn to Christ. They're coming to Christ. And we can imagine they're all coming near to him. And who's out on the fringes? Who's in the corners? And grumbling. And grumbling were the saints and the legalists, saying, why is this man with sinners, receiving them and eating with them? The Pharisees, the word Pharisee, as best as we can understand, and this is only a close approximation, it is the Hebrew equivalent of a saint. It's someone who is set apart from the community. They've set themselves apart. Why? By being super moral. So these saints and the legalists, the words that they use for the scribes is grammarians. These are people who are nitpicky. These are religious lawyers, if you want to figure it out. They're going through the Bible and seeing what kind of caveats, what kind of things they can win in their arguments against using the Bible against God, as it were. So here are the saints and the legalists. They're around the corners and they're grumbling amongst themselves. And what are they saying? Why is this man with sinners? Why is he receiving them? And for heaven's sakes, why is he eating with them in the Middle East, even to this day, but especially during Jesus' time? Eating with someone was a sign that you regarded them as an equal. It's intimate. And even today, I mean, I remember I told this story when I was working at Starbucks. The best dinner I ever had while I was working at Starbucks was a day when everything was closed. We had to close down for a few days because we were doing a remodel. But we were brought in and we were kind of cleaning up, and we couldn't serve any customers, so we just got together and we ate dinner together. And it's amazing how much better along you get with people when you're able to eat with them. So they're complaining. He's eating with these people. He thinks they're equal to him. And they grumble, grumble, grumble. That Hebrew word is great. So this can bring up a lot of questions, can't it? First question we should ask is, what is Jesus' message that is so alluring to these people, to these outsiders? Think about that. We all love those movies where someone turns their life around. In fact, all great stories are about that, where someone turns their life around. And we're wondering, here Jesus is embodying that. People are turning their lives around and coming to him. And so we're like, what is he saying? What's the magical word? But notice the other thing. The good people, the insiders, they're offended. They're offended by Jesus. They're offended because he used these so-called outsiders as equal to him. They're much like those companies, that I was talking about at the beginning, the institutions, that they see something change, some change. They don't want to get on board with that change. They want to fight that change because that change that's bringing people in and growing people, that's not the way we've always done it. That's not the way things have done. That's not the way we work around here. So Jesus answers their questions with a series of parables. And the two parables that come up are the parable of the lost sheep and the lost coin, which are wonderful and beautiful, and we talked about them before, and I wish we could talk about them today, but you only have so much time. So he comes and he tells what is probably one of the most famous parables. We are probably misnaming it. Well, we are definitely misnaming it. It could better be stated as this is the parable of the father and the two sons, although there's another parable with, my two sons. And another one is what Tim Keller, the Presbyterian pastor, calls Prodigal God, which, by the way, if you haven't read that book, this is kind of a distillation of that book. If you haven't read it, go out and borrow it from the library. Prodigal God by Tim Keller, fantastic book. There's a shameless plug, but I'm going to shamelessly copy his main points here, which he shamelessly copied from someone else. Thou shalt not steal doesn't apply to pastors, by the way. We steal each other's sermons all the time. So we are familiar with the journey of the younger son. Now, what's interesting, we should note, is he wishes his father were dead. The statement that he gives, give me my property. Well, you can only give your property after you're dead. So what he is saying is, cut up yourself and hand it to me. Give me this. He wishes his father were dead so he can do what he wants, but soon finds that life is better even amongst those who serve his father. And we're familiar with this passage. The most poignant moment is the embarrassing scene, and it can only be described as that because men do not run, especially the patriarchs of households in the Middle East, do not run for anything. And the father runs while the boy is still away, cutting him off before he can fully apologize, before he can give this speech that he's been rehearsing. And before any of this, he says, we're having a feast. Now this is important for us to remember. This is something very unique about Christianity, that it's good just to pause here before going on with our main thoughts. And Christianity, while it does not offer cheap grace, while it does demand a changed heart, is also ready to forgive you before you've made an apology. Remember what the Bible says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He did not wait for us to clean up his act and then say, okay, now I'm going to make the atonement. He makes the atonement in preparation for us being ready to accept him. And so, while he was still a long way off, the Father runs to this Son. Now, we too often end at this point. We roll the credits a little too soon, don't we? This was never the full intent of the story, or even its main thrust. Because you see, we must remember there is another brother in this story, and ironically, he is often overlooked. But he likes to be overlooked because he knows that he's a good person. He can privately preen and talk about how wonderful he is. And being overlooked at the end of this story fits perfectly with his personality. This brother likes being overlooked, and he likes not standing out. You see, good people don't toot their own horns or draw attention to themselves, much like the saints and the legalists. They know what God really likes. And yet, he happens to hear off in the distance merriment, and a party. We all know people like this who are very moral people, but they would never dare go to a party where people are happy. They only become happy when they seem miserable. It's all well and good for others to have fun, he thinks, but it is the serious-minded and the stoical people who really make the world work. And he asks a servant what all this frivolity is. And the servant is overcome with joy in reporting that the lost son has returned. And we're told a lot here. We are told that the father receives Apolaban, his brother, back, this brother of the older brother, this brother back safe. And the word is hugianto. And hugianta is this wonderful word. It means safe and sound. This notion is, it's as if someone's coming back from the dead. It literally encompasses this notion of receiving this back in fullness. Nothing was lost. This brother is whole. But then we are told the other brother is enraged, and he refuses to go in. There is a blinding rage over this brother, and we ask ourselves, why shouldn't he be happy? Now, what is usually missed in this, and it's because Jesus compacts so much into this parable. The father humbles himself to go out and talk to the older son. This act of going out is in the middle of a party, is just as humiliating as running to the younger brother, the other brother. He humbles himself in going out and talking to this person. The brother hasn't even asked, this other brother hasn't even asked the father to come out. He is happy being angry. It's a party for one, a pity party for one, and he is just happy being angry out there. But the father runs to him too, because he realizes that there is a disunion here that is just as grievous as this lost son over on the other side of the world. And so he comes out shamefully. If the other brother has a problem, he should go in and talk to the father. The patriarch of a family does not come out and try and persuade this stubborn child to come in and join the party. And then we see the mask of the older brother finally fall from his face. All these years he has been working for the father, not out of love or respect, but out of status and out of honor. His father's prodigal waste, that's what the word means. Prodigal is to give everything you have, not even thinking about the future. Anyone who has seen the cross knows that it is a prodigal waste. What a waste of a God to nail him to a tree for refuse like you and me. This prodigal waste of his father is proving just how mistaken this other brother has been in trusting this family, this father. He should be more respectable. This father should have been more respectable to the crowd, and he should have understood his status like the older brother does. And so we end here, and what's interesting is where we end, where we find ourselves ending. You notice there's no reconciliation at the end. It just stops with the father's plea to the older brother. Why does he do that? Why? Because at the very beginning, we notice who he's talking to. And he heard the grumblings and the murmurs of the religious people, the saints. and the legalists. And what does he do? He tells them this parable. This parable is not meant, although you can take it that way if you're lost. You can take it that way if you feel God doesn't love you. You can take it that way if you've been wandering in a far country. But this parable is for the religious insiders. And that's why we're terrified of it. That's why it frightens us so much. Because, heaven forbid, people might start talking. We welcome sinners. We eat with sinners. We let sinners come into our house. Many churches are sadly filled with the older brothers who are standing outside the banquet feast because they are demanding a different inheritance. An inheritance where the prodigal son is put in his place and the Father owes us for services rendered. Now, I want to let you know, at my worst times, I am like that older brother and not like the younger brother, because the younger brother gets it. The younger brother understands grace, but me, I grew up in the church. I've never really wanted to rebel against the church. I love the church, and sometimes I am tempted to be like the older brother, where I think that my goodness and my morality, my clean slate, has earned me my salvation, has earned me a seat at my own personal banquet. You know, many institutions, as we talked about at the beginning, are waiting for the problems of the world to match the solutions that they already have. Many churches are demanding people to clean up their act first, and then they can be part of the church where all the good people sit around. All the older brothers sit around. And that is tempting. But perhaps we should see what God does in this story. For the Father is God. And He runs to those children on the outside and the inside. He does not let them stay apart from Him, which is the main thrust of the story. Reunion with God. And reunion is possible whether you're an insider or an outsider. All you have to do is join the banquet feast of the Lamb. So the question we must ask ourselves in the church is who the returning son is going to meet on his arrival home. Will he meet an older brother, apparently, allegedly pulled him down the fort? Or will he meet a father who runs to meet him while he was still a long way off and gets ready to join the banquet feast of the Lamb? Amen.